Hello, everybody. This is a new episode of Ink to Table. I'm here with my lovely co-host.
Caleb, and we are here to introduce a special bonus episode. We interviewed Joseph Karg, who is the writer and artist of a book on Kickstarter right now called Dear Bernadette, which is sort of a collection of art and a series of letters to his young daughter. It's a very cool book that really blew past its funding goal. It seems to be getting some attention. And I've known Joe for a long, long time, like 9 years. And he's one of the guys who sort of got me thinking about Kickstarter and is, something of a mentor figure to me. So when he hit me up and asked if he could be included on Ink to Table, of course I said yes. And his book is looking awesome, and so we just had him on to have a conversation about it. And in just a minute here, you'll get to hear that conversation. But before we do that, we wanted to take a moment to remind you guys who are listening that, as always, Curtis and I are always launching projects on Kickstarter, and we both have one live right now. So Curtis, you want to give us a quick pitch on yours and tell us what it is?
Yeah, mine is called The Dragon Grit. It's got dragons, and it's a Western. It's killing it right now. Issues 1 through 4 are live right now. It's one of my best Kickstarters I've had.
Yeah, of
What
course.
do you have?
Right, and mine is called Banished Knights, and it's sort of like if Power Rangers met Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it's French. So that's what Banished Knights is.
That's awesome.
And
Is the comic in French or English?
no, it's just in English.
Okay, cool.
But uh, for those of you listening, we're goofing, we're pulling your chain because Banished Knights is Curtis's excellent book that is on Kickstarter right now. It's the first issue. It's a very cool new series and my book is called Dragon Grit. It's fourth issue. It's on Kickstarter right now. So if you want to check out either of our books, we've got links on the Substack. So go ahead and give that a look. But enough talking about us. We've got a great interview with Joseph Karg. So let's get into it.
Hello, everybody. This is Curtis Clow, and we're here with another episode of Ink to Table. I'm here with
Caleb, obviously, as always, and we've got a great guest today. It's Joe Karg.
Hello.
Joe is somebody I've known for a long time, and he was one of the first comic book guys that I met way back when I was starting out, and he's got a new book on Kickstarter after about 9 years away from Kickstarter called Dear Bernadette. And I am just going to let Joe quickly explain what that is.
Yeah, thank you. So, Dear Bernadette is a collection of illustrations and letters to my daughter, Bernadette, who is just about to turn 2 years old. And it's kind of this project that came from a place of like breaking away from the industry, wanting to kind of draw and paint for myself and trying to find a version of that felt, fulfilling in some way. And so it was like, it's everything that I wanted to draw for the last 2 years, and then everything that I wanted to say about kind of what it is to be an artist and what it is to be creative. And it's like part parenting, almost like a memoir, part comedy, part art criticism, film criticism. It's like a pretty eclectic project. I'm really excited about it.
Sweet. So the first question that I wanted to ask you, Joe, has to do with, we at Ink to Table, we're all about indie comics, obviously, but people like me and Curtis have been from the beginning really trying to grind it out as like indie creators, and
Yeah.
and to various degrees of success. But you have really had a lot of experience more professionally, and now you're coming into it as something that's totally creator owned. that's totally yours. And so whereas people who are in the shoes that Curtis and I are in, where we might we're doing our own thing and we're like, oh, maybe someday we would work for like a big company. You're kind of coming at it from the other direction. And I guess I want to ask you about like, what is your perspective, having worked for major animated TV shows and having worked for major video game and production companies, now coming into your own independent work? Like, why are you choosing to do that? And is, working for Marvel, Snap, and Hulu all it's cracked up to be?
I mean, the short answer is no. Um, Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in a way we know that that's true because the last 25 years or so have seen the biggest comic book creators from these companies constantly leave these companies to the second that they can to make something that's theirs. And maybe part of that is, it's not just about profitability. The story of the Image guys leaving Marvel and becoming millionaires overnight is not the only reason that they left Marvel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I would say, the short version of this is, even though I've had experiences working for huge companies or big IPs, I definitely never felt like I was one of the kind of chosen artists that like built like a massive online fan following, or got paid a really premium price to be at those companies. I always felt like a kind of like just a gun for hire that was not necessarily abused, but also certainly not like praised or rewarded. It wasn't like some cushy experience. And when those contracts are over, there is such a flatness to the experience. I kind of feel like, I remember when I was working as a background painter for Archer, those hours are grueling, especially if you don't know, in animation, usually the first half of the season, you're not allowed to work more than 40 hours a week. They want to cap that, and they want to control the money going out. But inevitably, the show starts to air, they're behind schedule, and then the expectation is that everybody's going to start working 45, 50, 55, 60 hours a week. They'll kind of politely ask you to take half-hour lunches. They'll send you a message at 5 p.m. asking you to stay till 7 instead of 6, these types of things. And it really starts to feel like a lot. And then the season's over, you go on hiatus, you don't have any money. So all that extra money, that kind of time and a half or double time that you're making sometimes when you're crunching, that feels like you're all of a sudden making way more money, is like this uncertain amount of money that you have to now live off of for some, undisclosed, unknown amount of time before maybe you're invited back for the next season or something. So there's a kind of a scrappiness that I feel like you have to have when you're like a freelancer and you're out there working for these big companies. The other side of it is like, because of that, I started teaching. I've been teaching college art now for 10 years. For 6 of those years were like just part-time. And that is another difficult situation to be in, because then you can't take on big jobs. You can't take on, not that I was offered, but like if Marvel had knocked on my door and said, we want you to do this 4-issue miniseries or something, it would have been so difficult to figure out how to juggle that along with teaching or the other freelance that you're doing, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I kind of found myself in this position where, like, by the time my daughter was born 2 years ago, I was full time teaching at Kennesaw University, which is just north of Atlanta. And I was on a tenure track for being a professor. And I had always felt like that was something that I would just step away from as soon as some big art job came along. And then my daughter was born, and the insurance mattered, and my pension started to feel nice. And I also had at that time I was working on Marvel Snap, and I was feeling a lot of frustration working on that project, which I'm happy to go into if you want. But I just was like, man, this is crazy. I like all I ever wanted was to draw Marvel characters, and now I've drawn 50 of these cards that are basically like cover, cover art, and it felt so empty and like so dissatisfying. And so um, I was like, well, all right, I'll start making something that I own that can become passive income, that can also be the beginning of something. So like my goal with the Dear Bernadette project is to be the beginning of like a boutique publishing company.
Sure.
Yeah. And
Do you see
and just
yourself doing more comics after this, or you're like more the Dear Bernadette style book,
no, my next project is a comic.
full comic? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, so for anyone listening to this who obviously doesn't know my personal history with Joe, we years ago we met, and he had just come off of writing a comic book, and that project has its own complicated history. But he had you and your co-creator had kickstarted a comic book.
Yeah.
And at the time, of course, I don't remember how much you raised, maybe $15,000 or something like that.
It was
And
just under. Yeah.
okay. And at that time, I was like, wow, that's so much money. If I ever make
Yeah.
that much money, I will have it made.
Yeah. Sure.
Like it was,
Sure.
you were like a superstar at that time to me. I was talking to Curtis
Wow.
about that and how, like, perspective changes, of course. But yeah, so I mean, I know that project and some of you've done a lot of weird projects on Kickstarter. I guess maybe that's my next question, which is that of all of the projects that you've launched on Kickstarter, I was looking, only one of them has been a comic book.
Yeah.
And the others have been sort of more like art books,
Mm-hmm.
collections
Yep.
of things that you've done. And so you in your responses that you gave us for the issue of Ink to Table, which will already be out when this podcast is out, you said that you're planning on alternating between comics and sort of more art book style things.
Yeah.
And so to you, what's the appeal of that, the Dear Bernadette style book?
I think Dear Bernadette lets me be the most myself, which is that I am a pretty eclectic artist. Like I've always I've always felt like the thing that made it really difficult to freelance at times, and it has 100% made it impossible to build a following, is that I just don't want to draw the same things all the time. I don't want to draw with the same tools all the time. I don't have the same thing to say all the time. Like I used to have so much envy and admiration for these people that could just day in and day out grind out. Can I curse on here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Fucking ghostwriters. You know,
Sure.
it's like, here's Ghost Rider. Here he is again. Here he is another way. Here he is in space. I'm like, who? Wow, that's amazing. Wow, look at that guy's really good at fire. That guy's really good at motorcycles or whatever. And I felt like there was something wrong with me as an artist, that I just didn't want to do that. And so that was a really hard part of figuring out what to do for Dear Bernadette, like, or what became Dear Bernadette. Like when I decided to stop freelancing, I had no path forward that was clear to me. And I had been collaborating with my friend Chris Bivens for 7 years. And our goal was to get a Marvel or DC project.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, we were working on a 6-issue comic book with the writer Paul Jenkins, who wrote like Wolverine Origin and a number of other things. He created The Century, which is about to be in the Thunderbolts movie. And he also wrote like my favorite single issue of Spider-Man back in the day. But like that was for this like Canadian startup. And we thought that we got that job, in the fall of 2019. And it took months to figure out all the contracts and to figure out the schedule and everything. And that was it. I quit my teaching job and I went to Australia at the beginning of 2020 when it was on fire, and I was just working on the first issue of this 6-issue miniseries that I thought, this is it, man. I'm with a real writer. We're gonna produce an insanely beautiful book. It was a really weird, like for everybody who likes Severance, which I do not include myself among them, but I get why you like it. But anyway, like this was like that. It was like a mind fuck kind of like sci-fi time travel, David Lynchian kind of comic book story. And by the time we got to issue 2, it was such a nightmare in terms of like we had severe disagreements with the publisher about how we were expected to deliver these things. They wanted to do all of this innovative stuff with sound and animation and motion graphics, and they wanted to do it for every panel, not just the key panels, blah, blah, blah. And then COVID happened and they lost their funding and the project got canceled. And it was like the greatest day of my life. And also a huge bummer because it felt like this, even though it was going poorly, I was still excited to at least finally have a comic book out there that was mine. And then not too long after that, I think we were already working on Marvel, what became Marvel Snap. We didn't know what it was at that time, but I tried to get a few more comic book ideas started with Chris, and I just couldn't get them off the ground.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, you guys know, and I'm sure your audience knows, comic books are I think it's the hardest thing to do. I don't think there is any. I don't think there is anything that's harder than making a good comic book.
Sure.
And so, to circle back to your question, one of the reasons that I'm making an art book, which, you know, collection of a bunch of different illustrations and stuff, was I needed a project where I could draw a lot and kind of figure out what worked best for me before I sat down to do a graphic novel.
Sure.
And I have 100% cracked the code with Dear Bernadette. Like, you'll see, like, it's incredible. Like, I'm proud. There is no filler in that book. There's not a single image that I'm not proud of, but you are going to see someone experimenting. Like, there is
Sure.
a lot of different stuff happening in the effort of trying to find something that I can sit down and singularly produce for the next year.
So, speaking of, to tie it back into comics, you know, the first comic that I ever read of yours was something you had written for another artist, and then you talked about this other project that never got off the ground, got canceled, was for another artist, or for another writer, sorry, that you were going to draw. So that your comic that you're going to come out with next year, are you writing and drawing that?
I'm not sure how that's going to come out. I'm working on it with my friend Ryan Prowse, who is a filmmaker. He's a writer, director. He's got a feature film coming out this year called Night Patrol, which I'm extremely excited about. It's like a vampire movie. But at this moment, we're still kind of like figuring out what our dynamic is. I will have story credit on it. So guaranteed, like, we're going to develop the idea together, but whether or not we're co-writers or I'm just like a story credit and he's like a writer credit, I don't know.
Sure.
But and also it's possible that we won't end up. It's a weird time to ask about it, only because like I wrote something that I liked. I wrote an outline that I liked, and I had a conversation with Ryan this week about it, and he said that he likes it, but he just doesn't see his way into it. And so we have a meeting on Friday to figure out what else we could do.
Sure.
And I think that the way that I currently feel is either we're going to have a meeting on Friday and I'm going to be really excited about this new idea, or we're going to have a meeting on Friday and it's going to confirm a kind of a feeling that I have about how excited I am about this idea that I've already come up with, in which case I think I'll just write it on my own.
Sure.
Do you have a preference when it comes to like writing comics to or compared to like drawing sequential art, or like would you like to work as a writer with artists in the future, or would you rather see yourself just kind of writing and drawing your own stories?
I would go. I like both sides.
Yeah.
I love responding to a script. I think that as a visual storyteller, you're a writer. Like if you're a comic book artist, you're a writer anyway. I mean, it's like weird that it's like writer gets one credit, artist gets another credit because you're. I mean, you're you are adding things and you are making. It's different than film. Like a cinematographer is in some ways more like the way that I think an artist is credited in comics, you know. But um, in comic books, you are a visual storyteller, and I mean, like obviously, the history of comics. There's so many examples of this where it's weighted way more one way than the other. Like Watchmen. I think we can give Alan Moore quite a lot of credit for the success of how all the images work inside that book because he's writing like a page per panel in some cases. And then you've got obviously the Stan Lee Jack Kirby dynamic where, or Frank Miller was like this too. He would write a kind of an outline and let the artists flesh out quite a lot of the story there. So um, I'm happy to work with Ryan, but it is important to me that uh, what I don't want is for him to just write a script and for me to interpret that because moving forward, I've never been more protective of what I'm considering my brand.
Sure.
Um, and through Dear Bernadette, I've kind of figured out that there's this triangulation of like me as a father, me as a teacher, and me as a storyteller. And I want everything I do moving forward to very clearly reflect one of those or more of those facets. So, the story that I came up with is about two kids and it's a sci-fi plot and one of them's based on my daughter and I love that. I'm like very emotionally invested already in this idea of like just getting to draw my daughter for a year. So for us to do something different, it better be pretty good.
So I think what I love about your current project and everything you've been talking about is that it's so clear that becoming a parent has like fundamentally changed how you view your work and how you view like what you want to be doing with your time. And that's something I can fully relate to, because I'm a stepfather and like that has been like a really dramatic um, change in how I view things. I
Hmm.
take risks differently. I
Yeah.
exercise my creativity differently. It's like you said about your teaching job and you have benefits and you have health insurance and this stuff, and that all of a sudden really, really matters. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's definitely like something that I've started to do is kind of view the decisions that I'm making differently. And the fact that you're like so thoroughly incorporating that into your art is I think really cool, and it feels very authentic to where you're at as an artist, which is
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, it's nice. I've been telling people this last week since the Kickstarter has been going so well, that like I've never had a project that's such an easy idea to communicate and connect effortlessly to a really diverse amount of people.
And I think what's really impressive about it is normally, if somebody tells me that they're launching an art book on Kickstarter, especially if they, haven't been launching a lot of Kickstarters, I'm like holding my breath, like this is not going to go well. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that, and I think that the reason that yours is doing quite well is because I think of that authenticity. It feels very clear and vibrant, which I think is wouldn't be true of just like Joe Karg's uh, art book volume 3, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which just kind of feels
100%.
like, oh, I took all the illustrations that I've made and threw them into a book and please buy it, and that's not what this is.
Right. In fact, I mean, it's really funny. Like, I've become almost judgmental. Like what you just said, you're like, good luck with that. Or like what I think sometimes is like, what do I care? What do I care that you drew these 50 things,
Hmm.
or whatever. Um, but like the writing is what's interesting about my book. The images, I'm proud of the images. I think that I am demonstrating a certain level of like technical ability with the images, but the images don't mean they're so flat to me without the commentary, you know?
Yeah.
And also from the few I've sent it out to about 20 readers initially before I'm sending it. I hired an editor to do like an official, editing pass on it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I was really surprised when I got feedback from the people that read it that nobody said anything about the images.
Huh.
Like outside of the, oh, these are nice, but like 100, I mean, like literally it felt like 100% of the feedback I got was about specifics about this letter made me cry, or this letter was so interesting, I never thought about this from this angle, or you know what I mean, like, and that's what I want. Like it, I never thought of myself as a writer.
Yeah.
When I got hired or asked, the person I did El Grande, my previous successful Kickstarter, I did that with my teacher Elio Guevara, and he asked me to help him write it. And I think I said it like this in one of the answers to the interview that you sent me. But like I felt like I just spoke better English than he did, and that's why I got to be the writer of that. And it also was this experience of like, it was his project. It was always his project that I was just like pitching,
Sure.
pitching ideas for. And the end product is pretty messy because it's not a singular writer's vision of something. It's like it's like a thousand ideas that got whittled down to somebody's favorite five,
Sure.
and then those got kind of stuck together. And so I think something that I had felt at the time that I continue to feel about that project is that like I'm proud of it. It took us a decade and we worked really hard on it, but that is his book. It does
Sure.
not feel like my book.
That's fair.
Um, and I think because of that, for a long time, I never felt like a writer. If you had asked me 2 years ago if I was a writer, I would have probably said no, or
Mm.
that I don't identify as a writer, but I do now. And it was the way that I got to that place in kind of a lucky way was by writing letters. There's no way for you to not be yourself when you're writing a letter to somebody.
Yeah.
And when you write 70 letters, you know, you are you're a multifaceted kind of expression of yourself, which I think is really interesting. It becomes something really interesting to experience or to express. And I think also going back to why this wasn't a comic first, I'm also so grateful that it was this first, because I think that there's 30 or 40 letters that hit the floor
Sure.
that are not in this book that I didn't like, or I didn't feel like they were interesting enough, or that they were redundant, or I started learning how to become a much more critical writer along the way.
So, another person that we often talk to in Kickstarter comics world is a guy named Joe Schmalke, and he is doing a book that is very connected to his own kid because it's like a dark magic school thing, and he's doing a new book every year, sort of Harry Potter style, except the main character is aging up with his daughter, right? So
Right.
by the time the last book comes out, his daughter will be graduating. Now, is that something
Wow.
that do you think that your books here will evolve with your daughter as she grows up?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't speak to my plan is to do a Dear Bernadette every other year,
Mm-hmm.
and each one will be 2 years of her life. And at the moment, my thought is to do it until she's old enough to read them,
Sure.
which is like 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think I will change. I think obviously my response to her will change. The world will change. Media will change. Yeah, I think this will be a pretty dynamic project. And I'm so grateful for that too, because like it, just by the nature of how it comes together, each volume will be, I think, significantly different from the previous ones.
Sure. Okay, so I want to get into crunchy Kickstarter stuff because,
Oh, good.
which I think is something that Curtis is going to perk up a little bit about. So you were
Data.
last on Kickstarter 9 years ago, And
Mm-hmm.
there was that Kickstarter that you ran that was successful.
Yeah.
And but then you left the platform for 9 years. I mean, in that time, both Curtis and I literally like started and grew our Kickstarter followings. And so we have sort of gradually changed and adapted to how Kickstarter has changed. But from your perspective, what are the biggest changes on how Kickstarter works and what it feels like from 9 years ago to today?
It feels identical to me.
Okay.
And I'll explain what I mean. I mean, like, right now my project has 125 pledges, and those are almost exclusively names I know. And that's how it felt, a decade ago. The difference is my friends have gotten better jobs, you know, and I have like higher reward tiers and different things, like I think I put a stronger project together. So actually, sorry, let me back up a second. I do think that seeing projects like the ones that you guys do are like hugely influential on the difference for how I prepared for Kickstarter and my approach to Kickstarter this time. So I paid $1,000 to hire animators to help me, make that video. I worked with professional sound designers that were gracious enough through my friend who teaches audio design to work on the project. Um, I made sure that my book was finished before I even started. I mean, with the exception of a few, I'm still tweaking it, but it's pretty much ready to go. Like the Kickstarter will end, and this will go to the printer within a week or two. Um, uh, Things like the pre-launch option was not an option a decade ago, and I think I didn't really optimize that this time. I think for next year when I do it, I'm gonna do the pre-launch a bit earlier and also incentivize people to click that button. Offer a free product or offer some kind of preview or something. Um, but yeah, okay. Differences. The reason that I initially said it's the same is that I just like day one we hit our goal in 6 hours, and I didn't even know we hit our goal because I was just sitting in a chair texting every single person that I've ever had coffee with. Just like trying to not sound like a robot, trying to be personal enough. But ultimately, it was that first day, which was about $6,800, was 100% me. That was just me texting people.
Sure.
The next 2 days, it went up to 8,300, and that was people that just hadn't seen my text yet.
Do you
you know,
does it feel like it's like your first Kickstarter all over again? Because like the goal is as you launch more that you don't have to send out those texts and it just kind of comes more organically and naturally. Like
yes,
does this kind of feel like your first Kickstarter because it's been 9 years?
it feels like every Kickstarter. This is my fourth Kickstarter, and it's the first one. But that's my fault. That is my fault because every Kickstarter I've done has been really different. It's been really different than the other ones, and I was not building. I wasn't building a fan base. I wasn't building a mailing list. So. Um, I think that will change moving forward. Like on the heels of this Kickstarter, I'm going to launch a newsletter. I want to do like a monthly newsletter. I want to start to grab, in my surveys, I'll ask people if they want to join that. I want to start to build a relationship with like a really core dedicated group of people, which I learned from Caleb.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I,
I would.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't have thought to do that way if I hadn't talked to you a while ago. I forget when we had that conversation, but maybe a year ago.
Maybe I don't know. But I mean, I feel like given having read a bunch of Dear Bernadette and just knowing you, I feel like something that feels like very Substacky, that's like you just like talking about your art and your life would be something that people would be really into. And I feel like that could almost grow on its own, even independent of Kickstarters, which is, everything is like a feedback loop and helps it everything else. But certainly, if there was a Joe Karg Substack or newsletter where I got sort of things that feel like the essays in Dear Bernadette every month, I would be very into that.
Oh, that's great, man. I'm so happy to hear you say that because that is what I'm gonna do. So yeah, I've already started. Like the graphic designer that I worked with on Dear Bernadette, his name's Kyle Diana. He's an amazing like typographical,
I was
kind
gonna
of
ask you
group.
about that. So is he doing all of the layouts for like, because like the design looks great. You have a lot of text, and we
Oh,
have a friend Andrew Maxwell is putting together like a kaiju magazine, and I know it's
oh,
been like a
cool.
headache finding good
Oh,
designers and
really?
stuff that can like.
Oh,
Well,
dude,
I
you
guess for
should.
him, yeah, yeah.
If he wants to talk to Kyle, I think Kyle's looking for that kind of work. Yeah, Kyle's a genius. And I'll tell you this, you haven't seen anything yet. Like Kyle was kind of in a frustrating way. He was sort of waiting for me to finish the book until he kind of like quote unquote really got to work. And I never knew to what degree that he meant that. I didn't know if he was just trying to say, okay, I'm going to do it or this will change or whatever. But I got an updated version of the book literally this morning when I woke up and my jaw just hit the floor. He's doing like real storytelling with the design.
That's awesome.
And I from the version that I sent Caleb, I removed some sections. I retitled chapters. I'm doing some structural shifts in the book, but I think you're going to be I think that the way that people will remember, the way that people will talk about this book initially is going to be about Kyle's contribution. I think they're gonna like when people walk up to my table and they open the book and flip through it. I think that initial ooh and ah is gonna be because of him. They're gonna feel instantly like they're looking at something that was put out by like a museum or Taschen or something like that. These like really big coffee table books that are just beautifully structurally designed. Um, so yeah,
Have you noticed anything different? I know you said like the Kickstarter kind of feels the same from 9 years ago. Have you noticed anything different as far as like the audience and like just trying to gain natural backers on the platform? Like anything that comes to mind for you?
yeah. Well, I mean, so we at the end of day one, we got chosen as like projects we love, and I'm really grateful for that, and I'm hopeful that that will lead to some organic pledges, and I think it has. There's been a couple people that um, like a woman from Print Ninja like backed the book and then sort of used that as a way to like send me an email to see if I would print the book with
Sure.
them, which
Yeah.
hey, great. No
Yeah.
problem. Like I'm happy to talk to you. And I was polite to her. I said, "Hey, this is our quote. Can you beat it?" And she said no, and I was like, "All right, well that's that." And uh but I I'll be curious in the analytics to see because Kickstarter is really they want to tell you who came from the projects we know from the Kickstarter homepage or within the app or whatever.
Yeah. Well, they
Something,
I think they
yeah.
still only let you look at that during the campaign, so make sure you get like a screenshot before it ends. Yeah,
Oh,
that
that
okay.
little.
that advanced analytics is still relatively new,
Hmm.
and it's got a lot of really great data on there. But yeah, they do close it out as soon as your campaign ends.
Wow, that's great to know.
Yeah.
Um, Something that has I don't want to say this has surprised me, but I had a conversation last week with a friend of mine who's a publicist, just about like the difficulty of how hard is it to get somebody to buy a book who doesn't know me,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yep.
And she was like, look, for something like this, it's a 50 after shipping, it's like $50, right?
Hmm.
You haven't put something like this out before. People, you are not a known proven thing, XYZ, all these different things, right? Um, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. You're totally right. Like nobody who's an influencer in the reading spaces has read my book and reviewed my book.
Hmm.
No one's seen it in their local library, bookstore, comic shop, whatever, right? So there's going to be a whole life that this thing takes once I've got books in hand. I've done a couple conventions. Like I'm going out and people are just reading it. People, I think of the 126 people who have currently purchased the book, the only people who really have an understanding of what it is are people like Caleb, who I sent a preview to. I,
Right.
my guess is that most people probably feel like this is a children's book, you
Sure.
know, and it very much isn't. So, um,
So,
uh, yeah, sorry. Go
oh,
ahead.
well, I was gonna say, I'm looking at your Kickstarter. Something that I hadn't noticed before is you've got a guest list, and the top name on there is a name that that I think is interesting that you kind of just drop and move on. Is Stephen Frank, who is
Yeah,
that's like a the Iron Giant, like Marvel What If, like big deal guy. Um,
yeah.
so what when you say guest list, what does that mean? How is Steven involved in your book?
Steven's a friend of mine I met a few years ago who wrote the introduction to the book.
Oh, okay.
And Claudio Acciari wrote a second introduction. And then the other names on the guest list are in a section at the back of the book called Friends and Family, which is just a handful of artists who I invited to have like an interview in
Sure.
the book. So they contribute a single image and then we have a conversation. And it was kind of my answer to like a pinup gallery, except for that I wanted it to be more reflective of what the book was, which was like ideas. Like I didn't want to just have, I didn't want to just ask like six of my friends who are good artists to contribute some image, and
Sure.
you go, well, here they are. I, so, but I also, man, I don't know. Maybe I'm doing a disservice to the promotion or to the marketing of this by not shining more of a light on those guys. I just and women. But I think I feel a little bit maybe like self-conscious or trepidatious about like uh I don't know, like abusing that relationship, or like I'm cross posting, like the way that they are coming into play is that I'm cross posting on social media with them.
Sure.
um and like um uh like Stefan and Claudio are sharing it in their stories, and so like I was hoping that they would share it, but not, it didn't feel like a guaranteed way that it would be a part of the marketing. So
Sure.
yeah, so is that weird? I feel
No,
like
I
in your
mean
question you're kind of like, why aren't you?
a little bit. I
I think it could only help the Kickstarter probably if you just better spotlight that on there. Probably, yeah.
it's hard to say. I like to say. I mean, I know plenty of people on Kickstarter. If they had an introduction by someone like Stephen Frank, you would it would be like a big part of the marketing. I think he is such an interesting guy because that's as far as our conversation goes, because he does do all that work for like Marvel
Mhm.
Entertainment and he did Iron Giant, but he also has been very successful on Kickstarter with his own personal
Yeah,
stuff that he owns, like Silver
yeah,
and
and
yeah. And so he's someone I met around the same time I met you, and I think that's uh, it's a very, of course, different conversation. Like everyone's coming at it like no two paths are the same, but seeing that where he has both had that, like he has a big name, but also he's built
yeah,
up a Kickstarter following that feels almost independent of that, because of just
I
like
think it is.
yeah.
Yeah, it does feel independent of that.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, I if I had someone like that, um, writing a forward for my book, I probably would make a bigger deal out of it. But I also understand the weird guilt about it, and feeling like you want to be selling, like you're obviously not selling a forward by the dude
Right,
who worked on Iron Giant, right? You're selling your book, which is personal to
right.
you. Um, and
Yeah,
so, yeah,
I think it also, some of those people, it just wasn't a conversation ahead of the Kickstarter, so they agreed to be in the book or to
hmm
contribute something to the book, which maybe what I should have assumed is that they would understand that that means I'm gonna like make a big poster, like spotlight them a little bit more.
sure.
But I did feel scared. I don't know why. I felt scared about that. I felt like, what if he came on here and is he gonna feel like I'm trying to like use him, in some.
I
Yeah,
mean,
but
I think if you
as
have,
I'm saying it out loud, I think it's silly.
I
I
think if you
probably
have
should just
someone
update it.
write a foreword for your book, like they're more or less assuming that like the reason you had them write it and not just like your buddy from high school write it is because they are
Yeah, that's
someone
true.
that people know and care about. You know, those
That's true.
speaking of, I mean, it's always interesting because I think something that people like Curtis and I are always trying to do is like, can we get a variant cover artist who has like this big following, and then
Sure.
maybe they will post about it, and that will help get our campaign, you know, bring it to bigger heights. And that is like such a crapshoot, to be honest. I think,
Oh, well, I was
yeah,
actually about to say that too. So like if we would have had this conversation 2 weeks ago, I would have been like, oh man, hey, great. Let's make all the guests, let's get a photo for them and let's list their credits.
sure,
Smurfs, Iron Giant, Smurfs 2. He Stefan storyboarded on Spider-Verse for like a week before he moved.
sure,
Um, and now what I found is after we hit our goal, one of the first things that I was decided to do to try to like get bigger reach was like send targeted messages to huge art accounts and just humbly demonstrate that I'm a fan,
mm-hmm,
and then ask them if they would take a look, tell them, hey, we already hit our goal. I'm just trying to see how much further this can go. If you wouldn't mind taking a look and sharing, I would appreciate it. No pressure or whatever, right? And I probably sent out 200 of those at this point, and I'll send 200 more before it's done. But I've had 5 or 6 of those artists share it. It doesn't do anything.
yeah,
I think it raises awareness. I think it's helpful for my ego that Mindy Lee or any number of these other people like Jake Parker. Like I just got a message from Jake Parker, who's like the Inktober guy, and
yeah,
he's got 550,000 Instagram followers.
yeah.
And he was so nice, and he said, "Hey man, this looks great. I love your project. I'd be really happy to share it." And he hasn't shared it yet, but he seems to have demonstrated that he plans to. And I'm very curious to see if that moves the needle at all.
Yeah,
I'm the guy that like people come to me asking me to share their projects, and like I've done it before, and I've had people share my project, and like as I try to just politely tell them like I don't think it's gonna do much for them. Like especially me, I don't have that many followers compared to Jake Parker. Like maybe that could get some more eyes on it, but it's
Yeah.
like I think there really is an art to like warming an audience and like an audience knowing you, and like you have to do that like months beforehand to like really get them familiar with who you are and like what your
Yep.
project is to kind of sell it to them. Like
so
that's kind of the
yeah, for sure. It's something we talk about all the time because even so, like Curtis and I have experimented with sharing stuff that isn't ours or that we're tangentially tied to.
Yep.
Like when between Curtis and I, probably our if you combined our mailing list, it'd be like 6,000 people, probably like,
Yeah.
and that's like pretty high quality email lists, like with a really high open rate. When we first told we both sent out dedicated emails for Ink to Table when we launched it, and we got 100 people between us who signed up.
Yeah.
And that has grown.
I was
now.
one of them.
Yeah, thank you. And
I think it's a great idea.
oh, thank you. I
That's
appreciate
awesome.
that.
Thanks.
And I think people have been reading it and liking it, and it's been growing. I mean, we steadily
Yeah.
get more, and that was always the idea. But
Yeah.
that was with us saying, here's something that we are doing. Like, this is ours,
Right,
and
right, right.
we're doing it, but it's not like what you normally get from us, which is just comics.
Right.
And then when you take that, I've even experimented with, like trying to shout out stuff that's not mine. In fact, Curtis and I did an experiment where we both sent out a dedicated email saying, hey, you should sign up for my buddy's email list, who he's also a comic book creator. Here's the stuff that he's done, like bragging about it. And what was it, like maybe we got 15 each or something?
I think it was like less than 10 each. Yeah, it was nothing. I think that was my idea. And yeah, I mean, it was interesting just to see how it would work, and the results were not great.
But because of that, it's like, okay, people who, if you're following somebody, you decided to follow them for a specific reason. And if you stay following them, like whether it's on an email list or an Instagram account or whatever, like there's, that that audience might be warm to you. Like if Jake Parker puts out a new YouTube video, like the people who are subscribed to him are excited about that. But, you know, then if he posts a link to some other guy that you've never heard of's art book, do you care as his audience? You know, and I think that's where, but even when I've had a variant artist who has a variant on a comic, they post about it, crickets. Even
not much.
Even sometimes artists that I work with who are like the main artist on a book. I have one artist who has like 80,000 followers on Kickstarter, and he's the main artist on a very popular book that I do. And when he posts about it, it doesn't really make a difference. Like, yeah, the image that he posts will get like, you know, 15,000 likes or something, but then like none of those people come through and back the Kickstarter, right?
Back on that, I think Substack's cool because it's kind of like a middle ground, like how we said we did that cross promo thing and it didn't work out, but then like Ray was recommending Ink to Table and we got a ton of signups just from that. Like Substack does feel like a mix of like social media and a mailing list where it has like people can find you kind of naturally through Substack. So that you're probably taking the right route by going there for your mailing list.
Yeah, I mean, at one point I was thinking about like one regret that I have now that I'm in the middle of the Kickstarter, and it's a small regret because thank God it's going well, regardless. Like, it's like I'm only on Instagram.
Sure.
I kind of bailed on all these other platforms, and I really don't even want to be on Instagram because I find it to be, I don't think Instagram is contributing maybe if I'm being generous, maybe $500 to my campaign. And it's probably people that I would have run into and told about the project in person, right?
That's probably on the high end for I mean, compared to us. Yeah, I don't think social media doesn't really equate much to like Kickstarter backers and stuff for us. Yeah.
No,
Yeah, I mean, with my project, so like, yeah, again, it's like I'm not on X, I'm not on these other things. And I don't plan to be for the next one, but I do think that with my newsletter, like at one point I was like, well, should it be Substack or Patreon? And I was like, oh yeah, just do both, because some people are only on Patreon and that's where they want something like that. And some people are only on Substack and that's what they want. And, you know, I could be on Blue Sky and I could be on, now that I'm getting more acquainted with like creating reels, it's a little bit more of a option to be on TikTok. I just didn't have any idea how to be on TikTok before this campaign. But I feel like the other thing that is like so important, and this is why like when I'm thinking about what my comic book is going to be for next year, I think it's critical that it is an extension of this character that I'm building, the relationship with this audience.
Sure.
Like if I put out something that has nothing to do with me being a dad, nothing to do with, you know, writing the way that I write, with nothing to do with making the images the way I've made them, like it's like it would be such a, like I would expect it to come out and just confuse people, and instead I think that what I put out next, and you guys, man, you guys are amazing at this. You guys are fucking amazing at this. Like, I remember early on when you were making your different comics, I was like, okay, a vampire, unicorn, hunter, okay. And then it was like a detective vampire. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I didn't get it. And I was like, are you messing with me? And like, now I'm like, oh my God, I didn't see the long game where it's brilliant. Like one of your Kickstarters just ended and it popped up and it was like, okay, what add-ons do you want out of this 1 million products? Like all these stickers, all these other issues. Did you miss this graphic novel? Did you miss this? And guess what? They're all feel like they come from the same source, you know? Like if you like the thing you just bought, chances are you very well might like a lot of what we have as an add-on. That is brilliant, and I'm stealing it.
This is something that we've kind of learned the hard way through these years of Kickstarter, is when we do try to kind of go off genre, and we know, I mean, even our friend like Ray, who's had some of the biggest indie Kickstarters ever, when he even switches genres that your audience isn't used to, it can really flop compared to like when you know, that's the importance of like building that audience, getting it warm, and like sticking to a genre or like within a few genres and like having similar books. There's you know, it's just really an art to it, to growing your success.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it's very flattering to hear you talk about my campaigns that way. But I will say that it often feels like if I launch something that feels like a little bit more left of center, for what or far afield of what I normally do, then that support isn't there, or it's not there as much, and so I think that consistency is such a huge thing, and I personally feel that all of my stuff is very consistent in the way that it's written, in the tone, and like how it feels to read it, and that maybe is not necessarily clear to people who haven't read my stuff or who haven't engaged with it. But if you look at some of the most successful people on Kickstarter, they are extremely consistent in like the kind of stuff that they're making. Even if it's different books, it's like if they feel very similar, and whether that brand is like fantasy adventure, or if it's like porno comics, whatever it is, like
Right.
that consistency, I think makes a big difference. And so I think if you're talking about, okay, my next book, it's got to be about me being a dad, or about a young girl, or whatever that is, that connection, I think that is true, and that is going to make it feel coherent or consistent, which is a big deal. But yes, to address the other thing that you said, obviously everything that you make then becomes part of your back catalog, and if it's consistent, then because one thing that I will never regret is that even the books that weren't as big of a hit when I first launched them sell through. One of my biggest sellers on the backer kit is my book that I do called Space Monkey Nights Go, which is like a 90s Saturday morning cartoon thing that just has done terrible when I've launched it on Kickstarter, but I sell it consistently on the backer kit after campaigns. People are always wanting to pick that up, and so
Can you talk about backer kit versus like packaging and shipping your stuff on your own?
Well, you are still packaging it and shipping it on your own with BackerKit. It's just that BackerKit is a more robust survey tool that will let you offer those add-ons. It will.
But you have to pay to use. They take a percentage of your Kickstarter funds. Yeah. Kickstarter is working on their own survey tool right now, which would be free, but they're years behind BackerKit. BackerKits let you do like weight-based shipping, a lot of cool features that it can be a pain to learn, but they have like great customer service and like walking you through it and stuff.
Wow. Okay, so right now when my campaign ends and I send out surveys, what's limited about the surveys that I'm going to send through Kickstarter versus using something like BackerKit? Like, I know part of it is that I had to calculate shipping ahead of time.
I don't think Kickstarter does post-campaign add-ons still in their surveys.
Yeah.
So BackerKit.
Oh, so people can't. They have to choose their add-on. Up front.
Add-ons are pretty like within a year, anyways, on Kickstarter. But I think you can only get them during the campaign. So, like I double dip. You sell add-ons through your Kickstarter plus in the BackerKit survey, and you always get people like buying them on either side. So it's just extra money. Charging shipping is a huge one. What else, Caleb? So when you're signed up for the mailing list, like the way you can sort through emails and stuff, it's just all very intuitive on BackerKit.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's like a ton of great tools for sorting. Like, okay, it integrates. I use ShipStation for domestic orders, and there's a lot of good shipping software, but I use ShipStation. It integrates directly with BackerKit, and I do all sorts of things like little secret menu rewards that people get for like commenting on my page or voting in surveys or whatever.
Whoa.
And it's so easy because what I do, like, okay, so I put out, for every issue of Dragon Grit, I put out a survey, a Google survey that's like, vote on which sketch you want to be made into the cover. And then I export a CSV of all the emails of people who voted. And then on the BackerKit, I just upload it, create a segment that is like, okay, people who backed to this and left a comment and got a physical copy. And then I can just pop that extra reward into all of their, into the packing list for every single one of those backers. And now I'm not having to cross-reference and check. It's just like super easy. So that
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, BackerKit, since I haven't already signed up for it, it's too late for this campaign. Is that right?
No, it's not too late.
No, you still
Oh,
could,
really?
but if you're
You're
not, I mean, it's not always worth it if you don't have a ton of backers. Like if you're not over 200, I guess it just depends. Did you charge shipping on this Kickstarter or not? Or
Yeah.
yeah, so you already charged shipping. So like
so there. What percentage is this? Like 2% that they're going to charge you, Curtis?
something like that. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
So I don't know if it'll be worth the fee. It
I
just
see.
depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might be worth it to check out to try, but you are going to have to pay a few $100s to do it. And since you already charged shipping on your campaign, then you're not going to be able to charge shipping again, obviously. But
Right.
one of my
But your
favorite
add-ons would probably cover the cost of it anyways. The
Yeah.
add-ons that you would sell on BackerKit most likely if you
Well,
Depend-
maybe because
had
I don't
anything.
really have. I don't have that
Right,
many add-ons
right.
for
You have a
this
big
one. It's
backlog.
more like I'm thinking forward. Yeah.
I would
Mhm.
definitely say going forward, it's something that
Yeah.
you want to think
Yeah.
about. And the other thing that, so to get like maybe this is going too far into the weeds, but a few years ago, so I buy a lot of board games on Kickstarter. Like I'm a big board game guy. And a few years ago, there was a Kickstarter that like really changed my brain chemistry because it was a board game called the Darwin's Journeys, and it's just like about Darwin. It doesn't matter. But here's the thing. So they have this deluxe edition on Kickstarter, but then when there was no playmat on the Kickstarter. And then when they launched the backer kit, one of the questions is like, do you want to add this super fancy fucking playmat that comes in like a cool cartographer's tube to your order, right? And it was like an extra like $50 to get this fancy playmat. And I guarantee you they sold hundreds of those playmats. And ever since then, the question I ask Curtis all the time is, what's the playmat of comic books?
Right.
Right.
Our conversation every week. Yeah.
Yeah, we really do. And so something that I have been trying to do is like, what's an extra thing that when it comes to the backer kit is like a new add-on that wasn't offered on the Kickstarter. That's like an additional thing that's like hard to resist.
You know, it's a good one.
What?
A frame for like a print. Like
Sure.
you're getting a print anyway. Do you want us to just give you this frame that already has a mat cut so that you can just like pop this print in and put it on your wall? People like they don't like paying a lot for frames. It's always a bitch to order. Like,
Interesting.
especially if it was like some kind of cool frame
Yeah,
that like matched the
Interesting,
color
yeah.
of the print or something like that. Like that could be.
that could
I'm,
be cool.
I'm doing that. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
do it. You should do it. But yeah, so yeah, the backer kit is something that I think is so robust. And like Curtis said, right now at Kickstarter, in the last couple of years, they've realized that backer kit has like cornered the market on this post-campaign thing, and now
Yeah.
they're trying to do their own. Last year, Kickstarter hit me up to be involved in like a beta of their new pledge manager, but they still weren't offering new add-ons in the pledge manager. So I was like, I can't do it, man. I need to, once you have as many features or close to as many features as BaggerKit, I can do that. But it's I mean,
It should be coming out in the
Interesting.
next couple months. I mean, I know it's coming this year for sure, but it's the same way how BackerKit is now behind on crowdfunding, and they started a couple years ago after COVID, after Kickstarter had some mishaps.
Yeah.
So like now they're trying to catch up to Kickstarter on the crowdfunding side, and Kickstarter's trying to catch up on the pledge manager side. Just
Yeah.
the crowdfunding wars.
Yeah.
Do
Let me
you
ask you this.
Oh
Hang
yeah,
on.
go ahead.
I have a question for you. With Kickstarter is like the How to Think When You Draw and How to Think When You Write. Those guys, they make
yeah.
like $2 million per
Sure.
thing now, and they've got 8 volumes of that. Why on earth are they continuing to do Kickstarters? Why pay 5% of $2 million?
Because you're still getting new people organically through Kickstarter every time, especially because they're with the algorithm gods, where they're like probably on the front page of Kickstarter right now for comics, and
Right.
the amount of new people you get, where if they started their own website, a lot of, me and Caleb have seen many big people in the past go and try to avoid that percent that you have to pay Kickstarter. And like, if you can get a lot of returning backers, or if you already have a built up audience, like you're still going to do great, but maybe you would have more backers, and plus you're just getting new fans that you're going to then add to your mailing list to make the next one bigger.
It's hard to imagine abandoning the platform. So the biggest example that I have of that is, are you familiar with Stonemaier Games, the board game company? So there's this guy, Jamie Stegmaier, years ago now, maybe like 2014 or something. He launched a Kickstarter for a board game called Viticulture. which is a winemaking game. It's a huge success, international success, like really huge, like modern board game hit. And he did several more Kickstarters. A game called Scythe was another really huge Kickstarter. And in the last few years, he stopped doing Kickstarters, I think pre-pandemic. But at that point, within the board game world, I mean, he was like not just an indie success, Kickstarter success. I mean, he is like now represents like one of the like most well-known and respected board game companies in the world. Even though he started out on Kickstarter, I mean, this is like it's like, you know, it's like such a unicorn story. It's like Hugh Howey on Amazon with Silo, right? Like like similar to that, where it's like now he's like this massive success, and now he does he has his own website where obviously he's got distribution through through board game stores and through like Target and stuff, but then also you know, people pre-order his games on his website, and I'm sure that he makes just as much as he would on Kickstarter. But that's such a unique example of someone who has, you know, if you're the guy who made Wingspan and Viticulture, like you can do that. You know, if I'm like a comic book example is
Iron Spike.
Oh, maybe, but I'm thinking of Brian K. Vaughan. You remember years ago, Brian K. Vaughan did his own website. It might still be up, I don't know, where he was doing digital only.
That project. Yeah, with Marcos Martin.
Yeah, and it was pretty. I don't know, like the numbers wise, like I don't know if he ever like released like, but yeah, I mean, like, but if you're Brian K. Vaughan, you know, like you can kind of do what you want to do. But I think that, you know, Kickstarter is just such a powerful platform. And that's a question I got early on is like, oh, when do you stop using Kickstarter? And I'm like, when I'm Brian K. Vaughan, I'll stop using Kickstarter.
Yeah, sure.
For us, it's almost never, unless something gets as big as Kickstarter, like backer get crowdfunding, then of course we could switch over. But like doing our own site, probably never. Yeah.
Do you have a prediction? Like right now, I'm like $50 shy of $10,000, right? If I didn't do anything else for the next 3 weeks, what would be your expectation for the end of this to be?
I would say it depends on what your follower count is on your dashboard. You can see how many people.
It's like 125 or something.
It depends on the percent of those that have like already backed as well. Like that percent usually ends like somewhere around in the 20s, 25% or so. Because at 48 hours,
so there's a lot of people following that haven't necessarily.
I mean, that's just human nature. Yeah, people procrastinate, wait until the last second. So you're like in that dead zone right now in the middle of it where things get slow, and then in those last 48 hours, all those followers get a notification, and then they've even changed it where I think like the last 12 or 8 hours you get another notification. So you get those like last 2 days. You get like another rush, which is never as big as the first 2 days, but it's definitely like noticeable. Yeah,
I think
interesting. It's so maybe this will. I mean, obviously, I'm going to keep working and like keep spreading the word. And I know that there's people that are in my life that are planning on doing it that haven't done it yet. Whatever. So like my guess is that it'll probably cap out somewhere close to like 14 or 15. You know, but I wouldn't expect it to go much past there. I
think that's probably pretty reasonable. Usually, if you're at about the middle of the campaign, you know, you like depending on how much of a following you have on there and how much attention it's gotten, you can expect to maybe get another quarter to a third on top of that in terms of you know, but
quarter to a third's not bad. Can I pitch you something? I'm curious what your take on this is. We only worked on the animation for this for like 5 weeks before the project, and it was never intended to be an animation that was so incredible that people were just sharing the animation, you know? Especially because it's targeted, you know, it's like it's just VO of me being like, hey, blah 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 blah, you know, this is the project. For the comic book, I have this thought that the animation is like a preamble. It's like a 1 minute. And I was thinking about that board game that's huge right now on there, Flame and Fable or something like that.
Fate.
Is that what it's called? Fate and Fable?
Yeah, Flame and Fate or something like that,
yeah. Their animation is sick. And I know that the main guy did it, or he at least designed all of it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
My thought was, what if I worked on an animation for the next year? And the point of it is that it's like the beginning of the story, and the final frame of the animation is the first frame of the comic. And it's like, you want to see more? Read the comic.
I would
And
say, is that going to be like an advertisement, like the sharing it around, or
I mean,
more for the
that'll
Kickstarter
be the
video?
video. It'll be the video for the Kickstarter. You know, with the except maybe kind of like the board game. It'll be like that'll end, and then it'll cut to video footage of me being like, "Hi, I'm Joe Karg. Last year I did Dear Bernadette. Now I've got this new story. Blah blah blah." But yeah, the idea would be that would be certainly the pre-launch video is just like this teaser, and but I think if the animation is good enough, um, the animation community would share it. It would just be something that would have virality regardless of the Kickstarter. But
I
as
mean,
long as the Kickstarter, yeah,
I think that that's a cool idea. It just depends. I mean, as with everything else, it depends on can you get this in front of people's eyeballs, because you can have you
right,
put together the best animated video, you can put the best YouTube video together, like that
Going
is
viral is not a
exciting
guarantee.
on its own.
Yeah.
yeah,
And so it just depends on can you get it in front of the right people and how do you do that? Because yes, I think the idea of having like a sick animated short that then leads into a comic is like a really cool idea. It just depends on, you know,
I
will
think it
people
depends
see
on
it?
the resources, like the time and money and like the effort it would take as well. Because as for like Kickstarter videos, not that many people will even finish. Like if you look at your stats on your dashboard, like how many people watch the video and finish it, like it's
ooh,
always
I
a
should
very
go look at
low.
that.
Yeah. So like, is it worth the effort and money of doing it if all these people are not even finishing? Now, if you're going to be sharing on a social media and you have like some popular people sharing it, then maybe it's worth it. But like just for a Kickstarter video, probably not worth it.
I think that is a thing where the culture on Kickstarter has shifted, especially in the last 10 years, is that I think 10 years ago you saw people putting massive amounts of effort into like professionally shot videos. And now, at least on the comic side, it's less so. And I think everything is like in the professionalism aspect is so important. But I also, you know, I think you have to think about what's worth, you know, the resources like
The
um
games have a much bigger budget, so like I could see them putting the resources to do like that animated video that Flame and
Right.
Fable did is like really cool and really nice. But that I don't know how much time it took him to do that, but like obviously he's making it like he's at like 300,000 or something. So like his budget for
Right.
that stuff is a lot different than the comic budget, where you know a good comic Kickstarter is like $20,000, 15,000, and that
Right.
you know putting a budget aside for a Kickstarter video just isn't realistic or smart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's, I mean, you know, but if it's all connected, I mean, you know, part of that is just like building your
Creatively,
brand.
it's cool. It's cool
It's
for
cool,
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like it, and I'm like, I feel like it could be good regardless. Like just as like just a branding thing too. It's like, oh yeah, and you had that like sick animation.
True.
Um,
I
Also, storytelling wise, I think it's interesting that you're sort of introducing people to a world through this really beautiful other medium, and then kind of going like this continues on as like an illustrated thing. Especially if like my intention also is like the way that I want to stagger Dear Bernadette every other year. My intention also, and one of my criteria for this comic book is like it can't be a one shot.
sure.
Like it has to be self-contained, but you know, the next year I'll do Dear Bernadette Volume 2, and then the year after that is Volume 2 of Big Bang
Sure.
Theory. Like, I want to build something where people stay in the world, get to know characters.
I think that you have an interesting, like, because you're an artist and you are the artist presumably on the comic book that you're doing. You know, you can, that's another thing Curtis and I have talked a lot about, doing full graphic novels versus issue by issue. And of course for
Yeah.
us as as writers, like it just makes so much more sense financially to do issue by issue.
Right.
But you know, of course, an entire graphic novel is inarguably more appealing to the average reader,
Yeah.
because you know they get the full story, and then you know, and of course, people like, if you know, I I I think, you know, a huge important part is like making something that feels exciting, that people like, that isn't just pretty, you know, which is a battle we're all constantly facing on Kickstarter. But I have one more question for
Yeah.
you, which is you've talked a lot, both in your interview with us before and this time, about wanting something that's your own and to really be, making something that lasts for yourself, that doesn't feel hollow. So are you fully leaving the world of freelance art behind?
This was going to be my same exact last question. As a guy who's done like the Kickstarter thing full time for 4 years and freelance writing, like it seems like you want to do Kickstarter because of the freedom you have to make whatever you want, but you have that nice day job with insurance and all that important stuff when you have a family and kids and stuff that I don't have. And like somewhere along the lines, like if you're trying to do this full time, like that freedom goes away because your decisions and like every project matters so much. Like I had a very similar question on like what your goals are if you want to do this full time, like if you plan on leaving that job and stuff.
I'm not planning on leaving my teaching job.
Yeah.
So no. And I think even if these went huge, if I had a Kickstarter that made whatever, $100,000 and I was able to somehow, be like lucky enough to do that over and over again, I think I would still continue to teach because I really love it. I love being a teacher, and also the perks are, it's like I don't know, like yeah, I'm not sure what it would what it would take for me to just do this full time. It would have to be unbelievable success.
Sure. But
Um,
do you, because you have that stable teaching job, do you think that you will stop doing freelance work now?
I mean, I've stopped for the past 2 years in order to do this,
Yeah.
and my intention is to continue. The only thing I would say that's different is, like I'm gonna do the convent. I'm doing two conventions this year. I'm going to Heroes Con in Charlotte, and I'm gonna go to Dragon Con,
Mhm.
and I am interested in talking to artists that I like, who I either have a relationship with or I'd like a relationship with, and writers, and try to do some cover work, or at the very most, a backup, like an 8-page story.
Sure.
And I'll tell you this right now, if you're curious, I would do a cover for you. Um, like I just really like you, and I appreciate, I admire what you're doing, and I think it would be really cool to contribute to one of those projects, just to because I like that connectedness.
Yeah, hell yeah.
The thing that I care way more about moving forward, and maybe this is just like middle life or whatever, is like relationships.
Sure.
So I would not do a cover to a comic I don't like.
Sure.
And I'm not really interested in working with anybody I don't, at the very least, like respect. And
Sure.
like I think that's where I'm at. So I'm kind of like,
I
for the
mean,
most part, I'm not freelancing. Like I'm not a free agent. Like
sure.
encouraging people to reach out to me. If you hear this interview and you want me to do something for you, just be cautious. Be aware that I might say no.
I mean, I think that's a really beautiful place to be. You're like, you have a job that you like and you have stability for your family, and also you're able to devote your creative energy to just stuff that you care about and that you want to do. And I mean, to be honest, that's the dream right there. I mean, if
Yeah.
like when I met you like 8 years ago or whatever, I thought you had it made, and I will say now, I still
When I
think
was
you have
living
it
with
made.
4 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
Yeah.
I was living in a basement with 4 people, yes. Oh, how I had it made.
Well,
Dude, it looks like as this interview goes on, I'm about to enter the Undying Lands, doesn't it? It's like I'm just like Frodo. I'm like, I have to get on a boat now.
well, it's been great to talk to you, man, as always.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Please stay in touch. And Curtis, it's really nice to meet you too.
Yep, great to meet you as well, man.
Yeah, dude, I mean, I mean this genuinely. If you need anything, or if you want me to contribute to anything that you guys are working on, I mean, like I say this seriously, like I would do it as long as I had fun. I wouldn't even charge you for it.
okay. Yeah.
So
I have.
That's awesome. We
I have
appreciate that,
something
man.
I have something in mind. Actually, that I will definitely hit you up on. I mean, I still have that illustration you did for A Small Favor years ago. It's still hanging in my
oh, that's great.
in my hallway.
Wait,
Yeah.
I gave you that?
Do you remember the drawing of it's like a spaceman and his like AI floating head?
Oh yeah,
And they're like,
dude. Oh,
This is
I like
Caleb's
that
prized
image.
possession. He tells me about this every week on the
No.
phone, and you didn't even
No.
I was
remember.
thinking about that. I was thinking about. I did a piece for you for the mythology book
Yes,
too.
yes, you did. You did a piece of I believe Gilgamesh,
Yeah, Gilgamesh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for the mythology book. Yeah, and so that was
Dude,
cool.
I think about. I would crush that now. Okay. Uh, awesome. Yeah, hit me up, man. Please.
How well?
And everybody check out Dear Bernadette on Kickstarter. It's live for another couple weeks. Where can they find you on? You're on Instagram, you said?
Yeah, I'm just on Instagram. It's just my full name, Joseph Karg. Yep.
All right.
And,
Sweet.
yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Yeah.